The Supreme Court just killed what's left of the Voting Rights Act. States in the Deep South are already planning to redraw their maps, and Congress just went on a 10-day vacation, leaving the Iran war, food stamps, and domestic surveillance mostly unresolved, all with a midnight deadline tonight. It's Thursday, April 30th, 2026. I'm Grant Hermes. This is Make It Make Sense. Let's start here with the Supreme Court. Yesterday, the Supreme Court handed down one of the most consequential rulings of our lifetime. And I'm going to be straight with you here. I'm not going to do this full justice today because tomorrow I have Dave Daly from Fair Vote on the show. He is the single best person in the country to walk you through what this actually means for your vote, your district, your representation, regardless of your race or where you live. So you definitely want to come back for that. Subscribe so you don't miss it. But here's what you do need to know today. The Voting Rights Act, or the VRA, was passed during the Civil Rights era specifically to protect Black Americans in the South from being shut out of elections. The key piece is a section called Section 2. After a few court rulings in the 1980s, Section 2 basically meant that states cannot draw congressional district maps that dilute the voting power of people of color, even if it was accidental. Why does that matter? Well, because in the South, race and party are inseparable, mostly. Minority voters, and specifically Black voters, vote overwhelmingly Democratic. So if you let Republicans, who control Southern state legislatures, draw whatever maps they want, they will absolutely draw lines that make Black voters politically invisible. That's not just theory, that is documented history of how the country worked from like 1865 to 1965 and even all the way up until today. Section 2 fixed that by mandating majority-minority districts, essentially requiring that wherever a significant population of voters of color were, there had to be a district that gave them a real shot at actual representation in Congress. So the case, called Louisiana v. Callais, was a federal court that ruled Louisiana had to redraw its congressional map because the old one violated the VRA. The state is about a third Black, so 2 of its districts needed to be redrawn. They were, and the new map then gave 2 seats to Democrats. A group of, quote, non-Black voters, which is to say white people, sued, claiming the new map discriminated against them. The 6 conservative justices on the 9-justice Supreme Court agreed, and they just reset the standard for challenging district maps to requiring proof of racist intent, not racist outcome. That is pretty impossible to prove, which is exactly why that wasn't the standard before. And now I get it. On the surface, discrimination is discrimination sounds fair. But here's the thing. The VRA wasn't about taking anything away from white voters. It's only that if you think Black voters or voters of color gaining rights takes away the rights of white voters, which isn't how rights work. A white Republican living in a majority-minority district was much, much more likely to have their views represented by another Republican in the next district over in these states. Their entire state wasn't flipping. But for voters of color here, without these protected districts, they had no representation anywhere in Congress. That's the difference here. And that's what the VRA was set up to protect against. And we should put a name to this, and that is Chief Justice John Roberts. And he has been on a mission to do this since he was a young lawyer writing memos for Ronald Reagan, who actually specifically brought him on to find ways to dismantle the Voting Rights Act. Nearly a half century of his life has been spent on this, and yesterday it was mission accomplished. Now, within hours of the ruling, Florida passed a new congressional map, although that was getting worked on beforehand, but this ruling just backs it up. Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn posted an entirely Republican red-drawn map and called on her state to redraw the lines. Donald Trump said he called Tennessee's governor to redraw that map. And then this morning, Louisiana's governor suspended the May 16th primary, even though it's 2 weeks away and people have already voted early. Absentee ballots have already been mailed out to troops overseas and people who've requested them. And candidates have already spent tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, on their campaigns. And whether any of this is legal is up in the air right now, but sorting this out will take time. And in the meantime, this ruling has just handed the Deep South a permission slip to govern in ways that we haven't seen since they were trying to make Rosa Parks sit in the back of a bus. On paper, what this means is that Republicans could pick up somewhere between 12 to maybe 14 seats in the House before the midterms ever get here, before anybody ever actually casts a vote. I'm going to have more on all of this tomorrow with Dave Daly. You definitely do not want to miss it. Before we get to the midnight deadline chaos, a quick word from today's sponsor, Old Glory. If you're a fan of music, sports, or pop culture, Old Glory is the place to get your merch. More than 300,000 officially licensed items, everything from Bob Marley to the Beatles to the NBA, the NFL, NCAA, Marvel, video games, you name it, they probably got it. They've been family-owned since 1969, so you know that they're good. They have got same-day shipping, so you don't have to wait for any of those annoying shipping delays, and standard shipping right now is free. You can use the code MIMS25 at checkout at oldglory.com for 15% off your entire order. It also goes to support the show, so it's a win-win for both of us. Again, that is MIMS25 at oldglory.com. All right, let's get back to the show. For the last 75 days, the Department of Homeland Security was technically shut down, kind of. Before you skip over that, because I know that we've had a lot of government shutdowns this last year, this one does matter. It was a record setter, and most of what DHS does is essential work. So those workers who had to keep showing up to work had to do so without pay. We were talking about ICE and Border Patrol, although they did have some pre-funded money that lets them get paid out till 2029, so they were fine. TSA did get paid through some emergency workaround money, so did the Secret Service, but things like FEMA and the Coast Guard, they were not getting paid. The Coast Guard had to cancel training missions ahead of this summer's World Cup, which is not good when you think about who's going to be here this summer. Now, the shutdown started back in February. It was pushed by Democrats who wanted accountability reforms for ICE operations after killings by ICE agents in Minneapolis. They want body cameras, no more masked agents, real warrants from real judges, and identifiable uniforms on these ICE agents, among other things. The Senate passed a funding bill before Easter to get around what Democrats want, but Speaker of the House Mike Johnson said it would orphan parts of DHS, a phrase that he didn't explain and no one ever really cleared up. He also called the bill haphazardly put together. The president initially wouldn't sign anything unless his voter ID bill, the Save America Act, was somehow also passed. It doesn't have the votes to pass. Now, as I'm recording, the House has passed DHS funding to end this record-breaking shutdown, but they passed it by a voice vote, meaning there's no public record of how your representative voted. That's not an accident or laziness. That's so hardline members could say no to this bill, but then take a victory lap when it passes, blame Democrats, and then never actually have to answer for why they didn't want to fund DHS. But DHS is just the first of this midnight scramble. Here is what we have. FISA, Section 702. This is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. It lets intelligence agencies spy on foreign nationals abroad, but there is a massive, we'll call it, gray area about whether the government needs a warrant to also spy on Americans who communicate with those foreign nationals. Just a hint here, under the Fourth Amendment, they probably should have a warrant to do that. The House passed that yesterday, but the Senate still has to act on that tonight, or if they make changes, it has to go back to the House. The Farm Bill, this one is a big one, and it can get ugly here. It sets agriculture laws for the entire country, including SNAP or food stamps. It's been opposed by more than 300 farm groups, including Farm Aid, because it cuts millions of people off of food assistance. It favors corporate farms over family farms on things like access to rural electric grids and farming technology. It weakens environmental protections on farms and doesn't allow the USDA to rehire people like food safety inspectors, livestock inspectors, or business service specialists who were lifelines for small and family farms. There was also a late fight from the Make America Healthy Again crowd, RFK Jr.'s base, over cancer-causing pesticide protections that were being weakened. That provision got dropped late yesterday, but there are still unresolved issues, and again, the deadline is tonight. Then we have the War Powers Act, which gives the president 60 days to conduct military operations before needing congressional authorization to continue. Tonight at midnight, that clock runs out on the war in Iran. In any normal law-abiding administration, Trump would now go to Congress and ask them to vote on whether to keep this war going. We are not living in that world, because right after passing the DHS bill, Speaker Johnson sent the entire House home for a 10-day recess. Members are on planes right now. They will not be back in D.C. until May 12th, so the war, which legal experts already called unconstitutional, is now like extra unconstitutional, and Congress has effectively shrugged. There's also a real legal question about whether the current ceasefire, which Trump called indefinite, pauses the 60-day war powers clock or not. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told senators today that in his opinion, the ceasefire doesn't count. That's apparently the official administration position, but it's hard to argue that we're not still in active military operations when we're maintaining a naval blockade in the Strait of Hormuz and still spending hundreds of millions of dollars a week on those costs. I mean, Hegseth confirmed in a House hearing yesterday that the Pentagon's current estimate is that the war in Iran has cost us $25 billion so far. And as a reminder, that's not coming from the regular defense budget. Wars are billed separately, and we are running a very large tab. Now, before I wrap up on the Iran stuff, I need you to see this clip because this is the kind of thing that gets buried in a week and a day in a news cycle like this. In a House hearing yesterday, Hegseth was questioned by New York Democrat and fellow Iraq war veteran Pat Ryan about a U.S. base in Kuwait that was hit by an Iranian drone attack, killing 6 Americans. CBS News had spoken with internal Pentagon sources showing the base had no ability to defend against drones, no protection from overhead attacks, and no warning sirens were sounded as the attack happened. A survivor described the base as, quote, little tin buildings where we can set up makeshift offices. And when asked about the level of fortification, he said, I would put it in the none category.
The next day. So are you saying that these soldiers, our soldiers who survived this horrific attack, are lying?
What I'm saying is before the commencement of the conflict, we put in maximum defensive posture we could.
That's a direct
contradiction. We moved 70
what they said.
in this directing. Can I speak, or are you just going to monologue falsehoods all over the place?
It's not a falsehood.
We moved 7,500 troops off of the X based on the intel.
Stop.
Based on the intel.
Stop. Reclaiming my time.
Because you yell doesn't make you right. Just because you yell doesn't make you right.
I'm reclaiming my time on behalf of these survivors. You just said what they said is a falsehood.
There's a much larger picture.
True?
There's a much larger picture at play here that included integrated.
So what Hegseth is doing there is he's widening out. And yes, he gets interrupted by Ryan, but even when he has a chance to come back, he never goes back to the actual instance where those 6 service members were killed. He never says that that survivor was telling the truth. He still maintains that their account was false. There's a difference between explaining the overall plan and the failures of this instance. Now, there are growing calls in the Senate right now for an investigation into what happened in Kuwait, but we will just have to keep following that as it goes. So, here is where things stand as these deadlines hit. DHS funding appears to be moving. Passed by that vote in the House, it's now on the president's desk. The Farm Bill and FISA are on the Senate's plate with a real deadline pressure there, and the Iran war powers deadline expires at midnight, and with the House already gone, and at least a few senators, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Rand Paul, potentially willing to force a vote on a war powers resolution, which could be historic. Now, to be historic, because the War Powers Act has never actually been used to end a war, just start one, we genuinely don't know how that might play out. So I may be back this weekend with a special episode. Congress has a way of ruining my plans. All right. If you're new here, please like and subscribe, rate and review the show wherever you listen. And you definitely don't want to miss tomorrow's episode with Dave Daly from Fair Vote. He's going to break down exactly what this Supreme Court ruling means for your vote this November, no matter where you live. Thank you so much for watching today. I am Grant Hermes, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.